When the rain begins, a voice whispers your name from somewhere just beyond the window. If you respond, you disappear, replaced by the one who called you. The caller in the rain is a haunting tale of identity, memory, and the terrifying price of answering back. Prepare yourself for creeping dread, mirror-born horrors, and voices that linger long after the storm has passed. Subscribe now to stay up to date with our latest horror stories. And don't forget to hit the bell so the whispers don't find you first. The rain came suddenly, like it always did in Briar Hollow. Not a gentle drizzle, but a hard, ceaseless downpour that turned streets into streams and soaked the earth with something colder than water. Lydia Hart stood at the edge of her porch, arms wrapped tightly around her chest, eyes fixed on the misty road beyond the iron gate. The wind carried the scent of wet asphalt and something else, something sour, like rotting leaves and damp stone. She wasn't expecting a visitor. Not in this weather, not after what she heard the last time it rained. It had happened 3 nights ago. She'd been alone, curled up with a cup of tea and a worn copy of Rebecca, when the voice came. Soft at first, almost mistaken for the radio or a distant neighbor calling a pet. But it had called her name. Not once, 3 times. Lydia, Lydia, Lydia. Not shouted, not whispered, but breathed like it slipped through the cracks in her walls. It came from outside, she was sure of it, and yet it had curled inside her ears like it was only inches away. She had not answered. She had not moved. She had hardly breathed, and then the voice stopped. Just stopped. Tonight, it was raining again, harder. The kind of rain that drums on the rooftop and drowns out thoughts. She tried to close the door, but something, some instinct, told her to wait. So she stayed there, staring into the gray, the world shivering under the weight of water and something unseen. A low creak echoed through the hallway behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing. Only the sound of a clock ticking in the living room and the soft drip, drip, drip of water leaking somewhere inside. Lydia walked back into the house and locked the front door, pressing the bolt in place with trembling fingers. The hallway light flickered once, twice, then steadied again. The old house groaned, its bones weary and damp. She told herself it was just the wind, just age. But then she heard it again. Lydia! Her name, spoken like a secret. This time it was closer, inside. She backed into the kitchen, every step slow, deliberate, as if movement itself we'd summon something from the shadows. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and lemon cleaner, too ordinary to be comforting. She turned on the overhead light, and it buzzed, flickered, and chimed, then lit up with a weak, yellow hue. The voice didn't come again. Instead, the silence stretched, thick, heavy. Her ears strained against it, expecting the call to return, but it never did. Only the tick, tick, tick of the wall clock. Only the tap, tap, tap of water dripping into the sink. Only her breath, shaky and shallow. Then the phone rang. She jumped. A short scream tore from her lips, and she clutched her chest, heart galloping. The old landline phone sat by the window. No one used it anymore. She stared at it as it rang again and again. Ring! Ring! She didn't move. The machine picked up a soft beep, and then Lydia, the voice through the static. I see you. She ripped the phone cord from the wall. Dead silence. Her body shuddered. Every nerve screamed. Her legs almost buckled beneath her as she backed away from the window. Rain painted long streaks on the glass, like claws reaching down from the clouds. And in that moment, through the haze and the storm, she saw it. A figure, tall, still, standing across the street under the broken lamp. No umbrella, no coat, just standing, staring. She squinted. A man? A woman? She couldn't tell. The rain distorted the shape, but it didn't move. Not once. Suddenly, all the lights in the house went out. A loud click of the breaker. Darkness wrapped around her like a burial shroud. Her breath hitched. Then she fumbled for her phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead. Lydia. The voice came from behind her now, from the living room. She turned slowly. The TV was on. She hadn't touched the remote. The screen flickered with static. Then, without warning, an image appeared. Her house, the porch, the front door. Live footage. Someone was filming her home from the street. And then the camera panned slowly to the right. The figure was gone. The screen went black. Lydia screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. She bolted toward the hallway, hand outstretched in the dark, trying to find the flashlight she kept near the stairs. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the front door. Her hand froze inches from the drawer. Another knock. Then a voice, soft, wet, echoing through the wood. Lydia, I'm here now. She shook her head violently. No, no, no. She ran upstairs, her bare feet thudding against the old wood steps, the house seeming to lean and groan with every movement. She reached her bedroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Then pressed her back against it, sliding down to the floor. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rolled across the sky. She stayed there for hours, frozen, listening. But the knocking never came again. No more voice, no more static, no more figure on the street. Eventually, her eyes closed, not from peace, but from exhaustion. In the stillness of near sleep, as the storm outside finally began to soften, a final whisper slipped through the keyhole. Cold, inhuman. You should have answered. And then, silence. Lydia awoke to silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the thick, unnatural quiet that blankets a place after something violent has passed through. Her room was drenched in gray morning light, filtered through water-streaked windows. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its scent. Mud, ozone, and decay. She sat up slowly, her back stiff from sleeping against the bedroom door. Every joint ached. Her throat felt dry, as if she'd been screaming in her sleep. Had she? She listened. The house creaked softly. No voice, no knocking, no TV static. just the distant groan of pipes and the ticking of the clock downstairs. Ticking normally now, as though nothing had happened. But something had happened. She remembered it clearly. The whisper through the phone, the figure in the rain, the camera feed showing her house, and the voice at her door. She stood, legs shaky, and unlocked the bedroom door. The hallway was dim. The light bulb above flickered but didn't die. Downstairs, the front door was closed, locked, the television off, the phone still unplugged. Everything looked untouched, ordinary, as if the night had been a dream. But dreams don't leave bruises. She glanced at her arms. Faint purple shadows curled beneath her skin where she'd fallen. Her knees were scraped, her palms raw, real. She stepped outside just past 9. The sky was pale and swollen with clouds, not ready to release more rain, but never far from it. The street in front of her home was empty. No footprints on the wet sidewalk, no figure beneath the street lamp. The only movement was the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the slow drip of water from gutters. She crossed the street. Where had the figure stood? Right here, beneath the lamppost. She placed her hand against it, half expecting it to be ice cold, but it was just metal, slightly damp, unremarkable, and yet she felt watched, not in the obvious way. Not by a person, but by something, lingering. She turned, walked quickly back inside, and locked every door. That afternoon, Lydia visited the library. It was an old building nestled between the post office and the florist, and she had worked there part-time for 3 years. Today, she wasn't there to reshelve books or update the system. Today, she was searching. The whisper hadn't just been strange. It had been targeted. It had known her name. It had spoken it with purpose. So she did what any terrified person would do. She researched it. She sat at a corner desk, hunched over the old computer, typing in keywords with trembling fingers. Voice in rain, name whisper, urban legend, ghost calls, name during storm. Don't answer if rain whispers your name. Most results were nonsense. Horror forums, creepypasta, fictional accounts. But one result caught her eye. A blog post from 2009. Only 2 comments. Title: The Man Who Calls Names in the Rain. She clicked. The post was simple. A short paragraph describing a phenomenon experienced in a rural town in northern Maine. During storms, people claimed to hear their names called from outside their homes. Always in the rain, always in a whisper. One sentence had been bolded. If you answer, you vanish, and someone else comes in your place. Her breath caught. She scrolled down to the comments. The first said, I heard it in 2003. Didn't answer. Moved 3 states away. Never heard it again. The second said, my cousin answered. He changed. His voice was wrong. His eyes were wrong. He started writing names in the mirror. Then he disappeared. Lydia leaned back in the chair, every hair on her arms standing up. She looked around. The library was nearly empty, except for the elderly librarian at the front desk and a teenager buried in comic books. But still, she felt it, a weight pressing in, a chill not from the air conditioner. She left early. That night, she didn't sleep in her room. She dragged a blanket to the guest bedroom upstairs and closed the door. No TV, no phones, just silence until just after midnight. A sound. Shh. Like static, like whispering water. She sat up, tap, 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 the window. She crept toward it, slowly, her feet cold against the wooden floor. Outside, the street was dry, but the tapping didn't stop. Then she saw it. There was no rain, but her window was wet, dripping. She pressed her fingers to the glass. The moisture was inside. Her breath caught. She stepped back, and then she heard it. Not from outside, not from the hallway, but from right behind her, inside the room. "Lydia!" She turned slowly, the air frozen in her lungs. There was no one there. But a name was scrawled on the mirror above the guest room vanity. Her name, written in dripping condensation. And beneath it, a second name, Thomas. She didn't know a Thomas, but the name throbbed in her chest like a warning. She didn't sleep. Morning came gray and sluggish. The mirror was dry now. The name was gone, but the fear wasn't. Lydia called her mother later that day, voice trembling. "Did we know a Thomas from when I was younger?" Silence. Then, "No, sweetie. Why?" "No reason," she lied. She didn't mention the whisper, or the wet mirror, or the phone that rang again just once at 3:13 a.m. She didn't say her name again out loud, not even when she was alone, because the rain was coming back. She could feel it building in the clouds, pressing against the town like a held breath, and something was waiting inside it, calling, listening, for the moment she would slip, for the moment she would answer. The rain returned on the fourth night. It came not with a crash of thunder, but with a soft hiss, as if someone had whispered into the sky and the clouds responded in tears. Lydia was awake when it started. She sat in the dim glow of her hallway nightlight, listening the way a prey animal listens, tense, still, and painfully aware of every creak in the house. She hadn't left home all day. Something had changed after she saw her name on the mirror. And the other name, Thomas. She still didn't know who he was, but the sound of it lingered in her head like a song she couldn't unhear. It repeated over and over in her thoughts. Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. And now the rain had come again. The windows trembled under the weight of water. The gutters moaned. But worst of all was the sound from above. A faint shuffle, too deliberate to be wind, too soft to be a branch scraping the roof. It moved across the ceiling, slow and careful, like something pacing. Lydia held her breath. The sound stopped. And then a second sound, lower this time, like something breathing. She rose quietly, bare feet making no sound on the hallway floorboards. She stood beneath the attic hatch, heart pounding against her ribs. The ceiling above her remained still, but she could feel it. A presence pressing down from the darkness overhead. She reached for the light switch, but the bulb above the hatch was dead. Only shadow greeted her. The sound came again. Not quite a whisper, more like something dragging across old insulation. or wet skin against wood. Lydia backed away. She didn't go back to bed. She sat on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, holding the unplugged landline phone in her lap like a weapon. She didn't trust the power anymore. She didn't trust anything in this house after nightfall. The storm deepened. Lightning flashed, but gave no thunder. The house stayed dark, even with the electricity intact. Somewhere in the night, a voice called again. Not her name this time. "Thomas!" It came from the attic. The voice was different, older, hoarse, male. Not the one she had heard whisper her name. Not the wet voice from the phone. This was rougher, more urgent. It called once more. "Thomas, it's your turn." She gripped the phone tighter. Then the floor above her creaked. Not the attic, but her bedroom. Someone was walking in her room. She stood slowly, blankets sliding off her shoulders. Each step toward the stairs felt heavier, like gravity had thickened. The stairwell stretched longer than she remembered. She gripped the railing and climbed, every step accompanied by the house groaning beneath her. At the top, the door to her bedroom was open. She had left it closed. She reached the threshold, peered inside. Empty. But the bed was unmade. The closet door hung slightly ajar. She walked in. Rain struck the windows louder here. The trees outside flailed in the wind. She approached the closet, each step a whisper against the carpet. She reached out, fingers trembling, and pulled the door wide. Nothing, just coats, shoes, dust, and something else. A folded sheet of paper. She picked it up, unfolded it. There, in crooked handwriting, was a single sentence. He answered. Now he watches. A drop of water hit the page. She looked up. The ceiling above her bed was damp, darkened, bulging slightly. Then it split. A heavy, wet thump landed on the bed, something wrapped in tarp or thick cloth. Lydia screamed and stumbled backward as the bundle unrolled itself slowly, the fabric peeling away with a sickly, slurping sound. Inside was a mannequin, or at least it looked like one, but its face was painted, not in color, in detail. A man's face, eyes wide open, mouth parted in a silent cry. The lips were curled in the shape of a whisper. Period. On its chest, written in smudged ink, Thomas. Lydia staggered from the room. Her breath came in short, gasping bursts as she ran down the stairs, hands clutching the rail to avoid falling. At the bottom, she paused only to grab her keys and coat before bursting into the storm outside. She drove anywhere but home. She didn't stop until she reached the outskirts of town. A small gas station, glowing pale in the rain. She sat in the car, engine still running, staring through the windshield as water blurred her vision. Inside, she bought coffee from a machine that gurgled and spat like it was possessed. The clerk didn't look up. He just kept tapping at a flip phone that looked 10 years outdated. She sipped her coffee and stared at the flickering light above the counter. It buzzed faintly, like a fly trapped behind glass. "You're the one from Maple Street," the clerk said suddenly, not looking up. She blinked. "What? You're in the house that used to be Reeves' place, the Hart House now. You shouldn't be there when it rains." Lydia's voice shook. "Why not?" The clerk finally looked up. His eyes were wide and glassy, as if seeing through her. "Because he calls the ones who try to forget." She took a step back. "Who?" "The one who has no name. He takes yours instead, leaves a hollow behind, something that looks like you but isn't." He turned away then, went into the back without another word. She left. When she returned home, the rain had stopped. The house stood quiet, too quiet. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers. The living room was just as she left it, but on the couch, where she had sat hours before, was the landline phone. It was plugged back in and off the hook. She stepped closer. The receiver was wet, not damp, soaked, as if it had been submerged. She picked it up, and from the other end, breathing. Not hers, not human, slow, stretching across the line like a mouthful of water. Then a whisper. "Lydia, it's your turn." The next morning arrived shrouded in mist, as if the world itself were trying to forget the night before. The streets of Briar Hollow were empty, their usual quiet now laced with a suffocating stillness that made Lydia's skin crawl. She hadn't slept, couldn't, not after the mannequin, not after hearing her name whispered through the wet receiver. Her house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. Slow trap. Creeping labyrinth of forgotten voices and things that watched from just out of sight. She pulled back the curtain of her bedroom window, half expecting the mannequin to still be there, staring back from her bed. But the bed was empty. The sheets, however, were damp, not soaked, just wet enough to leave a chill in the fabric. No footprints, no tarp, no writing, as if it had never happened. But it had. She remembered the weight of the thing as it fell. The sound, thick, wet, like something dropped from a great height and split open. And she remembered the eyes. Painted, yes, but far too knowing. She hadn't gone to the attic, not yet, and she wouldn't. Instead, she made coffee with shaking hands and sat on the couch, staring at the unplugged landline. She didn't dare throw it away. Something told her that would only make it worse. Some part of her believed that if she destroyed the phone, the whisper would find another way in. The light through the windows flickered, not from electricity, but from movement. She turned toward the window, heart thudding. Rain wasn't falling, but the glass was slick. Outside in the mist, a figure, same place as before. Across the street, under the lamppost, unmoving. But this time, it looked up. Lydia stepped back instinctively, but she couldn't look away. The figure was clearer now. Tall, long-limbed, dressed in something dark and drenched. She couldn't make out the face, not exactly, but she saw the eyes, wide, pale, staring directly at her window, and then it raised its hand, not in greeting, but pointing straight at her. The living room lights flickered. A soft crackle filled the air, like static behind a wall. And then the window began to fog. On the inside, Lydia watched, frozen, as a trail of condensation crept from one corner of the glass to the other, like invisible fingers brushing across the surface. And slowly, deliberately, letters began to appear. I see you. She ran. She didn't grab a coat or shoes. She didn't lock the door. She fled barefoot into the street, heart hammering, eyes wild. The figure was gone. Only mist and silence remained. She drove to the only place she could think of, the library. Mrs. Rayner, the librarian, gave Lydia a strange look when she arrived, soaked in mist and panic. "You all right, dear?" she asked, her voice raspy with age. "No," Lydia said simply, brushing damp hair from her face. "But I need to use the archives." The older woman hesitated, then handed over the keys. Downstairs, in the basement beneath the library, the air was colder. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The room was lined with old file cabinets and dusty newspaper reels. Lydia searched the microfilm machine, found the reel marked 1985, 1995, and began scrolling. Something had to be here. Something about her house, about him. The name Thomas still echoed in her skull like a warning bell. She searched for anything. Deaths, disappearances, strange weather patterns. She stopped when she saw the headline. Local boy missing during storm. Family claims hearing his voice afterward. The article was from 1991. The boy's name was Thomas Reeve. Her breath caught. The same name, same address. Her house. The article went on to say he was last seen playing near the woods behind the Reeve property during a thunderstorm. His parents claimed to hear his voice the next night, calling to them from the attic. They searched, found nothing, but the voice came back the next storm. Eventually, they left town. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled further. Other articles. 1997. Woman claims husband changed after answering voice during rain. 2004. Family flees home after strange figures appear in windows. 2012. Unknown illness strikes occupant of Briar Hollow house. Lydia stepped back from the machine. Her house wasn't haunted. It was hollowed. Something lived there. Something that wore people like masks. That waited in the rain for you to listen, to respond. And once you did, you were no longer you. She drove back just before dusk. The sky was darkening, clouds heavy and thick above the hills. Rain was coming, again. Her hands clenched the wheels so tightly they ached. She didn't want to go back, but something in her knew she had to. She had to end it, or at least face it. The house was silent when she returned. The lights were dim. No whispers, no voices. For now. She walked through each room slowly, pausing at the base of the attic hatch. The rope hung low, like an invitation. She didn't touch it. Instead, she went to the bedroom. She closed the door, sat on the bed, and waited. The first drop of rain hit the window at 8:47 p.m. Then another. Then a torrent. She kept the lights on. All of them. She sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the fogging window. Then, just as before, the tap, tap, tap began. Not from the glass, from the mirror. She turned slowly. The mirror was misted. Again. She hadn't touched it since the night she saw her name. Now, a new message appeared. This time, written backward, as if penned by something behind the glass. "You're inside now." She stood, backed away, but the reflection didn't match her movements. Her mirror self stood still, then smiled, and behind the smile in the mirror's distant background, a figure emerged. Pale, soaked, wide-eyed, Thomas. He stood behind her reflection, his mouth moving silently. Lydia turned to look over her shoulder. Nothing. But when she faced the mirror again, her reflection was gone. In its place, the wide-eyed boy, still whispering. Then the lights went out, and the only sound left was her name, spoken again and again and again, but not from the mirror, not from the window, from inside her, from a voice that wasn't hers, repeating, calling. Lydia. Lydia's scream died before it ever left her throat. The moment her reflection vanished, the silence in the room became unbearable, thick, dense, like cotton stuffed into her ears. Even the rain outside seemed distant, as if she had been pulled underwater. The room looked the same, and yet not. The angles felt wrong. The walls seemed too close, the shadows too alive. She touched her throat. Her lips moved. No sound came out. She backed away from the mirror, eyes wide with a terror that no longer felt like her own. The air tasted stale. Her skin prickled. And though her ears should have been ringing from the pressure, all she could hear was a voice, not around her, but inside her skull. She answered. The whisper was old, dry, like dead leaves scraping stone. Lydia bolted. She fled the bedroom, down the hallway, down the stairs, every step accompanied by an echo that didn't match her pace. Something was following. No, not behind her, beneath her skin, inside her head. She reached the front door, fumbled with the lock, yanked it open. The world outside was gone. There was no street, no rain, no sky, just fog. Endless, shifting fog. She stepped back, closed the door. The house was no longer her home. It felt like a replica, too perfect, too still. She turned toward the living room. Her eyes landed on the couch. Someone was sitting there. She froze. It was her, sitting cross-legged, back to the door, facing the television, which was flickering with static. The other Lydia slowly turned her head. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth smiled too wide, too still. Lydia couldn't move. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed against the doorframe. The other her stood, one slow mechanical movement at a time, and walked toward her, bare feet whispering across the floor. That sound, scrape, slide, scrape. Like wet skin on tile, Lydia forced herself up, stumbled back into the hallway. The lights above her began to strobe, and then came the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from inside the walls, followed by a new voice. Not hers, not Thomas. A girl. You shouldn't have answered. Now you stay. The knocking grew louder, faster, from every direction. Lydia ran to the kitchen, locked the door behind her, pressed her back against it. Something moved on the ceiling. She looked up. A face pressed against the overhead light, translucent skin, eyes black as tar, mouth opening in a slow, soundless scream. She turned off the light. It disappeared. She stood in the dark, trying to breathe. Her thoughts scrambled. Her body was shaking. She needed help. She needed someone to see her, to pull her back. Her phone was still in the bedroom. No, too far. The landline. She crept into the hallway and saw the phone where she left it, next to the unplugged lamp. She picked up the receiver. Her hands were ice. There was no dial tone, only breathing. She almost dropped it. The voice came again, louder now. "Lydia, why did you answer?" Then, a second voice, a whisper beneath the first, not calling her name, repeating another. "Rachel, Rachel, Rachel." Lydia's blood ran cold. Rachel. That was her sister's name. A name she hadn't said in years. Not since the drowning. Not since the night the lake swallowed Rachel in the middle of a thunderstorm while Lydia stood frozen on the shore. Her hand gripped the phone tighter. "No," she whispered. The voices continued. "You left her," the phone hissed. "She called your name. You didn't answer. Now she's coming back." Lydia slammed the phone down. The walls moaned in response. The whole house seemed to shift, like it was breathing around her. The mirror in the hallway cracked. The light surged and burst. She ran again, back to the bedroom. She would write a message. Anything. If someone came, if anyone ever came, she needed them to know what happened. She grabbed a pen, flipped open a notebook, but the pages were already filled. Dozens of pages, all in her handwriting. She answered, she answered, she answered. Each page the same sentence, growing darker, more frantic, ink bleeding into the paper. The last page ended with, "Now I'm gone." She turned to the mirror. Her reflection had returned. But it wasn't right. It smiled when she didn't. Its eyes twitched too fast, and then it whispered, "I'm Rachel now." Lydia screamed. She grabbed the nearest object, a paperweight, and hurled it at the mirror. It shattered. The glass didn't fall. It melted, slithering down the wall like mercury, pooling on the floor. From that pool, hands began to rise, wet, bone white, fingernails blackened, arms stretched unnaturally long, reaching toward her feet. Lydia stumbled back. But the room was already shrinking. The walls moved in, groaning with hunger. The lights blinked red. The floor trembled. The rain outside resumed, pounding the windows with unnatural force. And then everything stopped. Silence. Stillness. The house was empty. The lights returned to normal. The rain ceased. A breeze stirred the broken curtain by the window. In the hallway mirror, a girl stood. Not Lydia. Her smile was soft, familiar. She wore Lydia's clothes, but her eyes were wide, hungry. She turned toward the glass and placed a single blood-stained hand against it. And behind her reflection, deep in the void, a boy waited. Thomas, smiling, waiting for the next voice, the next storm, the next answer. It rained again, not the loud kind, not the storm that howled and roared. This one was quiet, a whispering drizzle that soaked the town of Briar Hollow in a thin gray veil. The kind of rain that crept beneath doors, that slid into cracks, that waited. Inside the house on Maple Street, the girl wearing Lydia Hart's skin stood in front of the hallway mirror. She tilted her head. She smiled, slowly, like she was learning how. Her reflection smiled back, not delayed, not distorted, but different, too smooth, too polished. Behind the girl, the hallway was dark, still. Every light bulb had gone out hours ago. The power worked, but the lights didn't last. They flickered, they groaned, and then they died. The mirror, however, stayed bright. Its surface pulsed faintly with a pale sheen, as though it had become more than glass, as though it breathed. The girl, the one no longer quite Lydia, stepped closer. Her fingertips grazed the surface. She did not shiver. She did not blink. "Do you remember me?" she asked the reflection. It tilted its head in the opposite direction and whispered. "You're not the first." The voice didn't come from her lips. It came from the mirror, low and hollow, like wind in a sealed crypt. "I know," she said. The lights in the living room buzzed once, then popped with a sharp snap. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open. She didn't react. The girl turned and walked through the house, not cautiously, not with fear, but like someone returning to a familiar place after a long time away. She paused at the photos on the wall. Old frames holding images of smiling faces, frozen in time. She touched one, a picture of Lydia. Before all of this, her expression had been genuine, her smile real. The girl frowned at it, then scratched a long, deep gouge across the glass with her nail. From the kitchen came a soft knock. Then another. Then another. But not at the door. From the drain. The girl turned toward the sink. Water dripped slowly from the faucet, even though it had been shut tight. The drain gurgled. Then a voice rose through the pipe. "Let me out!" The voice was young, feminine, pleading. "Rachel." The girl's smile returned. She leaned over the sink. "I answered," she whispered. "You didn't." The drain hissed. Then came a long, wet slurp, like something being pulled deeper into a throat that had no end. Silence. Then the knock returned, this time from the attic. 3 slow taps. 1, 2, 3. She looked up. Footsteps followed. Not heavy, bare feet, dragging. She walked toward the staircase. Each step she took, the house answered, floorboards groaning, walls creaking, a low hum rising from the very bones of the building. The kind of sound old houses made, not out of age, but memory. At the top of the stairs, she paused. The attic hatch dangled slightly open, just enough to let the dark peer down. She didn't pull the rope. She just spoke. "Thomas," she said. A pause. Then, his voice. "I remember." The hatch widened on its own. From above, something moved. Something long-limbed, quiet. Something that wore the weight of too many years, too many names. He crawled down slowly, not with malice, but hunger. They stood face to face at last. The boy who once was Thomas, the girl who had been Lydia, now mirrors of something else. He smiled. "You did well," he said. She nodded. "I was patient." He touched her face. His hand left a faint trail of condensation. "You held her long enough." "She's still watching," the girl replied. I know, he said. They always do, at first. They turned in unison toward the mirror at the end of the hall. Inside it, something flickered. Not them. Lydia. Trapped. Eyes wide. Hands pressed against the glass. Screaming, but no sound escaped. She banged against the inside of the mirror, face contorted with panic. The girl leaned in, tapped the glass once. Shh, she whispered. The reflection shuddered, then faded. Thomas chuckled, low and dry. She'll sleep soon. The girl nodded, but her smile was gone. She stared at the mirror, longer than necessary. Thomas watched her. You feel it, he said. A statement, not a question. She didn't reply. You've held her too long, he added. Silence. She's seeping into you. The girl looked away. The light in the hallway flickered. For a brief second, her reflection returned. Not the hollow girl, but Lydia. Eyes burning, screaming. The girl gripped the edge of the mirror. Her mouth trembled. Then the image vanished again. She stepped back. Thomas frowned. You're not ready to be her. I don't want to be her, she snapped. You already are. The attic groaned behind them. From deep within, another voice whispered. A third name, one neither of them recognized. But they both turned to listen, smiling. Another voice, another storm, another answer. The mirror pulsed again. It remembered, and it always would. The rain had stopped by morning. Not gradually, not with the gentle fade of a passing storm. It stopped all at once, as if someone had flipped a switch in the clouds. The silence that followed was unnerving. No birds, no wind, no rustling trees. Only stillness, only breath. Inside the house on Maple Street, the girl who wore Lydia's face stood at the window. Her eyes were fixed on nothing. Her fingers tapped gently against the glass. Each tap was perfectly timed, as though echoing a rhythm only she could hear. Tap, tap, tap. Behind her, the mirror remained uncovered. The frame was cracked now. Hairline fractures webbed out from the center like frostbite spreading through old bone. If someone had stood close enough, they might have noticed the surface shimmered slightly, just beneath the reflection. They might have seen the figure pressing silently against the inside. They might have heard her scream. But no one came close, not anymore. The house had begun to rot from the inside, not with mold or decay, but with memory. Doors swelled, even when it was dry. Light bulbs flickered, even when the power was fine. The floorboards creaked when no one walked. And at night, it spoke. It had learned Lydia's voice perfectly now. From the hallway, from the vents, from the inside of the closet, it would whisper to no one and everyone at once. Help me! I'm still here! Don't listen to her! She isn't we. The girl never responded. She would lie in bed, perfectly still, and stare at the ceiling. She didn't blink often. She didn't breathe like most people did, because she wasn't most people anymore. That night, something changed. She opened the basement door. It had remained sealed until now. Lydia had never dared to explore it fully. She'd always felt that whatever was down there had already seen her, already reached her, long before she ever thought to descend. But now, it was different. Now she belonged here. She moved down the steps slowly, bare feet cold against the stone. The air grew thick, metallic. The further she walked, the more the house above her seemed to disappear. No creaks, no light, only dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The basement was deeper than she remembered, or perhaps deeper than it should have been. The steps twisted slightly, like the bones of something buried long ago, never meant to be disturbed. At the bottom, the air pulsed. A single hanging bulb swayed from a wire, not from wind, but from breath, the breath of something below. She stepped off the stairs and into the dark. The bulb flickered once, and then she saw the bed. In the corner of the basement, beneath a heavy sheet of shadow, sat a bed. Old, iron-framed, its mattress stained with rings of moisture that never dried. The blanket was patterned with tiny roses, the kind a child might have picked out long ago. She walked toward it. On the bed, something shifted. A shape. Small, curled. She paused. A whisper crawled from beneath the blanket. "Is it time?" The girl tilted her head. She recognized the voice. It was the first time she had heard her own real name in a long while. Rachel. The blanket moved again, revealing a thin arm. Pale, blue-veined. Tiny fingers gripped the edge like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. "I dreamed of the lake again," the voice said. The girl stepped forward. Rachel's face emerged from the dark. Her eyes were fogged but aware. "You let me drown." The words struck like thunder, not in volume, but in weight. The girl didn't respond. Rachel reached out. Her hand passed through the girl's chest like smoke. "You're not real," Rachel whispered. "You're what she became." The girl turned away. Behind her, the basement walls began to bleed. Not blood, but memory. Edges pulsed across the concrete, like film projected onto a breathing screen. Lydia, screaming in the mirror. Thomas, staring from the attic. A mother, crying in the hallway. A younger Rachel, slipping beneath the surface of black water, arms reaching upward. Then stillness. The bulb above exploded with a hiss. Darkness swallowed everything. When the girl came back up the stairs, something followed, but not with footsteps, with presence. It trailed her like a scent, a memory trying to remember itself. Something clawed and shapeless, echoing with voices that had no mouths. She sat at the edge of Lydia's bed. The sheets were damp again. She pressed her hand to the mattress. A heartbeat pulsed beneath it. She smiled. The house breathed with her now. It had accepted her, but there was still resistance. At night, the whispers returned. Lydia was still inside, not strong, but watching, pressed between the cracks of the glass, waiting for someone, anyone, to recognize the lie, to say her name, to bring her back. But the girl knew it never worked like that. Once the house knew your name, once it knew where you slept, it never let go. It simply waited and whispered until you whispered back. The old rotary phone in the hallway rang at exactly 2:37 a.m. One long ring. Then silence. The girl who now lived in Lydia's skin did not answer. She didn't need to. She already knew what voice would be waiting. It had called before, in the rain, in the mirror, in her dreams. But now it called when the sky was dry, when the stars blinked quietly behind thin clouds, when even the house seemed to be asleep, she walked past the phone slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the warped wood floor. The phone was still off the hook, the cord twisted like a coiled snake across the table. The receiver lay in its cradle, but the line buzzed faintly. Static, soft and wet, like someone breathing through wet cloth. She didn't touch it. Instead, she leaned in, listened. Lydia. The voice on the line was cracked and distant, as though echoing down a long, forgotten tunnel. It sounded like her, but older, tired, hollowed out. She smiled. "I'm not her anymore," she whispered. The static thickened, then cleared. "You were never her. You just wore her like skin." The girl's smile faded. She pulled the phone cord slowly, the coil stretching out like a vein pulled from the wall. The hum in the receiver deepened. Then came another voice. "She's still watching." This one was male, familiar. "Soft, Thomas." She paused. Her fingers gripped the cord tighter. "I thought you were gone," she said. "I never leave. Neither do they." A sound crackled through the line then. Not static, not words. A wet, slithering drag, like something crawling through the wires themselves. Then, silence. She hung up the phone, and it immediately rang again. This time, the voice was different. Small, childlike, fragile. "Rachel." The girl froze. That name again. But not from below, not from the house. From the outside, she turned slowly toward the window. Across the street, barely visible through the fog, stood a figure. Not tall like Thomas, not broken like the mirror. A little girl, soaked in moonlight, wearing a faded yellow raincoat. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her mouth didn't move, but the voice was hers. It rang clearly now, not from the phone, from every wall, every pipe, every shadow. "Rachel, let me in." The girl stepped back. "No!" The figure didn't move, but the world behind her did. The clouds above the street shimmered, bent unnaturally. Then rain began to fall. It didn't begin slowly. It slammed from the sky all at once, a noise like 1,000 fists beating on the rooftop. Water slammed the windows, surged into the gutters, howled down the chimney. And then the phone rang again. This time, the house didn't wait for her. It answered itself. The receiver rose on its own and hovered mid-air. A voice bled out. "You never buried her. You never spoke her name. You left her in the lake, and now she's coming up." The girl clutched her head. Her vision swam. She was back on the dock again. The thunder, the lightning, Rachel screaming, calling her name, Lydia frozen, the water swallowing. She blinked and the house returned, the hallway. The door, and the girl in the yellow raincoat now stood at the window, inside, dripping, smiling. "You're not me," the girl whispered. "I never wanted to be," the figure said, stepping closer. The lights exploded one by one. Glass scattered. The phone fell, shattering on the hardwood. Darkness fell, and in that darkness, a voice. Not Rachel's, not Lydia's. Something older, deeper. It came through every surface, through the wood, through the walls, through the wet air. One name traded, one soul kept. The mirror holds, the phone calls, the body wears. The girl screamed, but the sound never left her lips. It echoed backward into her throat. Trapped, the floor cracked beneath her. Water surged from the boards, black, cold, alive. She tried to run, but the water grabbed her ankles, pulled, dragged. Voices screamed through the phone's broken shell. Names, hundreds of them. Lost, forgotten, all once called, all once answered. And then, nothing. The rain stopped. The floor was dry again. The mirror was whole. And a girl stood in the hallway, wiping glass from her eyes. She looked like Lydia. She wore Lydia's face. But her mouth didn't move. The phone, now reassembled without touch, rang one final time. She picked it up, listened, and smiled. "Hello?" she said. "I remember." Andy. The rain had not returned in 2 nights. The air was thick with waiting. Clouds clung low above Briar Hollow, bloated and bruised, hanging like the breath of something hiding just out of sight. Inside the house on Maple Street, the girl who had once been Lydia stood still in the center of the living room. The phone, freshly reassembled by hands not hers, sat quietly on the end table, silent for now. The mirrors had grown stranger. They no longer reflected just her face. Sometimes they showed the hallway behind her long before she turned. Sometimes they showed the attic stairs, even when she stood in the kitchen. But most often, they showed nothing. A blank surface of shifting fog, like someone had painted the mirror with steam and trapped something behind it. She could feel them now, the watchers, not just Thomas, not just Rachel, all the voices that had once called, and all the mouths that had answered. They lived in the seams of the house, beneath the floorboards, in the spaces between words. She no longer needed to sleep, but she pretended. She laid on Lydia's bed, eyes closed, breath measured, arms folded across her chest like a corpse at rest. And when she pretended to sleep, the voices came. Not whispers now, louder, more direct. One spoke that night in a voice identical to her own. "You lied." She opened her eyes. The bedroom mirror glowed softly. She sat up. Across the room in the warped glass, Lydia stared back. Her mouth moved silently, her eyes wet with fury. Her fists slammed against the other side of the mirror, making no sound, but cracking the glass. For the first time, the girl flinched. Lydia's reflection didn't speak this time. She screamed. A silent, furious scream that vibrated through the room like wind beneath the floor. And then she did something new. She mouthed the girl's name. Not Lydia, not Rachel. The name the girl stumbled backward. She hadn't heard that name in years. She buried it, forgotten it, let the rain wash it away. But Lydia remembered, and in that moment, so did the house. The mirror shattered outward, shards flying into the room like bone-white teeth. The girl ducked, stumbled out of the bedroom, down the hallway. Doors slammed around her. Lights burst. The walls moaned like the house had taken a breath after centuries of silence. And then the phone rang. Not once, not twice, but constantly, shrill, screaming, nonstop. She ran to it, snatched it from the hook. "Stop it," she hissed. The voice on the line was not Lydia's. Not Thomas, not Rachel. It was hers, the girl she once was. The one who had walked into the house, soaked in grief and silence. The one who had stood on the lake shore all those years ago and didn't move. Her own voice, full of fear. "Why did you speak back?" The girl fell to her knees. She pressed the phone to her ear. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "You did," the voice replied. "You heard your name, and you answered. You always do." The mirror in the hallway melted. From it stepped Lydia. Not her reflection, her soul. Thin, shaking. Eyes glowing with the memory of drowning. "You wore me," she said softly. "You forgot who you were. So I remembered for you." The girl backed away. The house was shifting, cracking. The wood beneath her feet turned soft, then wet. The phone slipped from her hand and shattered into pieces that no longer looked like plastic. They looked like teeth. The girl screamed. The hallway stretched endlessly. Lydia walked slowly toward her, glass crunching beneath her bare feet. "Give it back," Lydia whispered. "I can't," the girl sobbed. "Then I'll take it." The walls screamed. The windows shattered. Rain poured through the ceiling without touching the roof. It came from inside now. A torrent of cold black water surged from every mirror in the house, sweeping down the stairs, across the hall, under doors. The house didn't flood from outside. It bled from its own memory. And in that flood, the girl saw faces. All the others who had answered. All the others who spoke back. Eyes wide, mouths open, whispers filling the water like song. She clawed her way toward the front door. It didn't open. Lydia reached her, took her hand, and everything stopped. The rain, the water, the whispers, silence. The house was still. And when morning came, the street outside looked peaceful, clean. A girl sat at the window again. She looked like Lydia. She smiled like Lydia. But her eyes were someone else's. And deep inside the mirror, behind the fog, a figure watched, waiting, for the next voice, for the next name, for the next whisper in the rain. It began with a single drop. No thunder, no flash, just the gentle sound of water tapping glass. Slow, rhythmic, almost thoughtful. The kind of rain that didn't announce itself with violence, but crept instead, quiet as breath, into every crack and corner. Inside the house on Maple Street, the girl stood at the window, watching the sky blur into water. She looked like Lydia Hart, same auburn hair, same eyes, but her reflection, faint and pale in the glass, was no longer hers alone. It watched her. She watched it. The rain grew heavier. Downstairs, the phone began to ring, not the rebuilt rotary phone. That had been gone since the last flood. This one was older, dusty, still mounted to the kitchen wall behind a cracked painting. Its receiver had not been lifted in decades, yet it rang. She didn't answer. She knew what would happen if she did. The mirror in the hall, long veiled beneath a heavy sheet, began to hum. The sheet fluttered, not from wind, but from something beneath. like breath behind fabric, like the slow exhale of something waking. She turned from the window and walked through the dim house. Her feet traced the same grooves Lydia had once made, paths from bed to stairs, from mirror to phone, from attic to basement. She paused outside the bathroom. The mirror was uncovered again, and on it, written in condensation that hadn't existed seconds before, were 4 words, "Let her out now." The voice came from behind her. Low, male, cold. Thomas. He had not spoken since the night Lydia returned. She turned, and he stood at the bottom of the staircase. Same soaked shirt, same broken eyes, the same smile he wore when he first called her name in the storm. "She's still here," he said. "You know it." The girl didn't speak. He stepped closer. "She's screaming, every night, behind your eyes." "I know," she said softly. Thomas's lips curled. "You're starting to scream with her." She shook her head. "I'm in control." Thomas tilted his head. "Then why do you cry when it rains?" She didn't answer. The lights flickered above them. Rain pounded harder now, drumming the roof like fists. Somewhere in the house, wood groaned. A mirror cracked. The girl walked past Thomas, down the hallway to the attic stairs. She had not climbed them since the first night, since the name was taken, since Lydia was swallowed. But now she did, one slow step after another. The air grew colder as she rose. The attic door opened before she touched it. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of rot and forgotten breath. The mirror stood in the center of the attic floor now, not mounted, not hung, standing, as if it had grown there from the wood itself. Its surface pulsed faintly, like skin. She stepped forward and stared into it. At first, nothing but her own face. Then, Lydia, pale, wet, screaming, mouth wide open behind the glass. Then, Rachel. Then Thomas. Then dozens, hundreds, all layered, all overlapping. The mirror shimmered, cracked. The voices returned. Not whispers now, a chorus. "Let us out!" "Give it back. Return the name. Free the rain." The girl reached forward, touched the mirror. It was warm. It throbbed beneath her palm, and then it pulled. She didn't fight. The house shook. Every door slammed open. Water poured from the mirrors. Names spilled through the walls like black smoke. From the attic, a scream rose. Not Lydia's, not the girl's, but something older, something forgotten, something that had fed for too long. The girl fell to her knees. The mirror screamed back, then shattered. Not into glass, but into air. It dissolved, and in the silence that followed, she opened her eyes. The attic was empty, the mirror gone. The water drained. No more voices. No more whispers. The phone stopped ringing. She stood slowly, breath uneven, then stepped down the stairs, 1 foot at a time, each lighter than the last. The house was still again. Too still. She walked into the hallway and past the mirror by the front door. Her reflection met her eyes, and only hers. She smiled, but the smile was different. Lydia was gone. The others had been swallowed, and she, whoever she had once been, had remained. The storm outside slowed to a drizzle. then stopped. Sunlight break through the clouds. For the first time in weeks, the house felt warm. But deep beneath the floorboards, beneath the basement stone, a new mirror began to form. And somewhere, far away, rain touched another window. A girl looked up and heard her name whispered softly from a voice she thought was her own.